world surrounded by franchises, reboots, and shared universes. An elite team of podcasters will risk body and soul to investigate the depths of intellectual properties, one multiverse, subgenre, and trend at a time. Who are we? We're the IP Squad. Welcome back to the IP Squad and our ongoing investigation into the Alien and Predator franchises that eventually become one franchise. I'm John Campbell. My partner for this investigation, Mike Ergoni.
It's me, and we're here for another sequel that is technically... We're at the precipice here, John. We're teetering on the brink of movies that are going to make us sigh and just hold our heads in disbelief.
Well,
this is right at the edge of that.
According to the research I've done, this was the one that when this movie we're talking about this week underperformed was when they were like, maybe we put the franchises together.
I mean,
this was at least the beginning of that conversation. Yeah, because this is the beginning of them being connected anyway.
Yep.
And so this led, but this started so this whole movie, this is the real turning point, like you're saying. This is the real, like, wait a minute, we own both of these things. This is sort of Fox going, there's nothing stopping us. And that movie is 1990's Predator 2.
Yes, indeed. We are here to talk about a different sort of jungle, the concrete jungle.
So reading about the production of this movie, the Thomas brothers are back as our writers who wrote the initial draft of the first Predator. It was their idea. And I like that Fox is like, just give us a bunch of ideas. And they gave them apparently 6 different pitches for a Predator sequel. And the one that lit up Fox's eyes was exactly that. We're like, what about urban jungle? And they're like, ooh, yes. And I mean, in a lot of ways, watching this, it makes sense, right? I mean, especially if the idea is the first movie is this alien creature being dropped into the tropes of a military action film. That the sequel is, let's take that same approach, but drop him into the middle of a cop action movie.
Yeah, I mean, but you also have... I mean, cop action movie is putting it so lightly, John.
Well, I mean, very
gang action movie, cop action movie,
the urban crime thriller that is. I mean, the when I say cop action movie, I mean your Dirty Harrys, your Cobras. You know, these things about like the streets are filled with crime and one guy with a big gun's got to clean it up. You know, even he's not a cop, but even something like Death Wish, right? Like it's sort of that thing about like, and I would have loved to have seen Bronson versus the Predator, but you an ugly motherfucker, I tell you.
And the Predator just turns around and goes, "Look who's talking, bub."
Yeah, I know, and I know from ugly. Predator 2 though is it's a real interesting sequel. One of the things I will say for sure in its favor, and I'm a defender of this movie, and this is definitely a movie that has gained a lot of a cult fandom. I think at the time was met with like, oh, that's not as good.
Because it's not though.
Oh, it's objectively, it's not as good a movie. I agree. This is a much dumber movie and a much sillier. The thing I was thinking about watching this last night is we were talking about last week on the show how the first Predator really elevates a schlocky idea. This is the schlocky Predator. This is just like, oh, we are gonna be the B movie.
And look, it's
with A-list resources.
It is.
Oh, it's a fun movie though.
Yeah, but undeniably there is a certain level of over the topness. I mean, I would say 90s-ness if this movie wasn't being produced in 89
Right.
and then released in 90.
It is an
right?
interesting point. You do start to see the beginnings of the 90s action movie in this film, though, for sure.
Just the over the top nature of it, the sheer amount of bullets being shot in the opening 15 minutes of this film.
The thing I never really thought about these two movies, but like this movie's a lot like RoboCop, but not satirical.
Interesting. Yeah.
'Cause,
I mean, look, we can point to any number of 80s action movies, right, that have this sort of tone to it.
I mentioned Cobra. This really reminds me of
Yeah.
Cobra, where it's just like the urban hellscape.
Cobra, Commando, like
Yeah.
there's
Most
there's
of these movies produced by Joel Silver, who produced this movie.
yeah.
And the first
Look,
Predator. And I mean, the thing that's so interesting about this is you're watching this going, oh, this is a Joel Silver production, because Joel Silver's big hits up to this point were Lethal Weapon, Predator, and Die Hard. And there are aspects of all three of those movies in this movie.
I mean, look, if you're not thinking Die Hard in the last act of this movie when Danny Glover is wandering around with a ripped shirt and like clinging to ledges, that's, I don't know what else. we
Yeah,
need
I
to be
mean,
seeing
and there's
there.
actors from all three of those movies. It's so just like Joel. This is all Joel Silver stuff thrown in a blender, you know. And I mean, he's at the top of his game at this point.
Sure, maybe this movie is not necessarily the top of his game, but
No, but this is definitely no.
Yeah.
You know, he's lucky that this same year he also put out Die Hard too.
yeah.
that definitely saved him. So the big thing right off the bat, I think, that is telling is just looking at the poster. The first time Schwarzenegger's on the poster, this time it's the Predator. The Predator is now the star of the franchise.
How many times in monster movies, whether they be like slasher movies or creature features or what have you, do in the sequels, okay, we know that we can't get our big star back from the first movie.
Yep.
So the star becomes the creature, right?
I would say most of them. Most
of them.
Most
yeah.
slasher or monster movies, that is the case. That at a certain point, the only recurring character is the creature.
And this feels no different, really, because we've replaced our entire cast.
There is no one from the first movie in this movie.
Except the guy in the Predator suit.
Yes, the only returning cast member is Kevin Peter Hall as the Predator.
Yeah.
Who really, I love reading about what a serious actor he was, that he took a whole different approach going, well, this is a different Predator. All right, so I'm going to learn a totally different kind of physicality to this.
And look, there's a lot of discussions in the Predator fan community about the different Predator actors, right? And the different Predator physicalities.
Yes.
We call the Predator in this movie the City Hunter,
Yes.
as he's commonly referred to.
Right.
And the City Hunter has a whole different vibe than the Jungle Hunter from the first movie.
Right. That's different from all the other. I mean, we'll get to there, but eventually when we get to the Predator, Shane Black's going to try to connect all these things, and we'll talk about how well that goes.
Not well.
Yeah. Not necessarily his fault, but yeah.
I do love that this particular Predator feels more like a slasher movie bad guy than he does the kind of, I don't know. I hate to disparage this movie right off the bat by saying this is a dumber monster in this movie, but it kind of is, right?
It's certainly a more chaotic monster than the Jungle Predator, right? Like this one doesn't seem to have as much strategy or goal as the first one. Really felt like he was a silent, stalking, was, sizing people up, was going, okay, there's my prey, this is my approach. This guy is more just like, I want blood, baby. I mean, he is closer. This Predator is a little bit more of a Jason Voorhees or,
I was going to say this feels more like Freddy Krueger in that
Yeah.
he fixates on a person and then anyone in that person's orbit is fair game.
Yeah, that's the thing is, I mean, we talked about the first movie certainly doesn't skimp on the gore and stuff. This one indulges. Holy shit. I don't know if you saw this. This was the first movie issued an NC-17 after the creation of that rating by the MPAA, and they had to submit this movie multiple times, double-digit times, to get the R rating it got.
Considering the exposed rib cages you see in the first 20 minutes of this movie are something from a Hawaiian restaurant, I believe it.
Yeah, they talked about they just kept Stephen Hopkins, the director of this movie, talked about just having to like shave off like 5 frames here, which leads into the stupidity of the MPA, of course, where it's just like, is this much rib cage okay? That much is too much, it's like that's that always seems a little dumb to me, but no, there's no question. This is more of an exploitation picture in that way. People are coming for blood, baby,
as well as coming from sex, because lest we forget, we're gonna get boobs into this picture,
which was definitely not the case. I would actually say that's a rare thing in the first Predator, that there isn't any nudity in it.
Sure,
just
the fact
for
that
80s
it's a
action
film.
Yeah. Because like we mentioned, Die Hard and Lethal Weapon, the other Joel Silver movies, definitely both have nudity in them. I mean, Lethal Weapon starts with a topless woman jumping off of a building.
That's fair.
Yeah. So it is interesting that is the case. But here, yes, definitely. And I think that was also part of the MPAA's thing. Because that, of course, we know they care about actually more than the gore.
That's true. Yeah. Look,
yeah.
You can have people getting their heads ripped off and spines torn out, but you show a pair of boobs, and we're going to have problems, mister.
Hey, whoa, come on. I got kids here.
There are kids here in this R-rated film.
Yeah. Kids love the Predator. Well, I was a kid who loved the Predator, as we've talked about. Like I don't know, but it never seemed, and even watches, it's not any level of realism to the violence. So I think there's always been some part of me that's been like, movies like The Predator don't feel like Saving Private Ryan or something like, what I mean? Like there's different kinds of movie violence. This is you can get so gory, and I think this movie is a case of this, where it actually loops back around to not being disturbing anymore to a certain extent, and it becomes like, oh man, that is goofy.
Obviously, like the end point of that is Evil Dead 2, right?
Yes,
so
100%.
This isn't quite to that level, but it is approaching it.
Yeah. By the way, according to IMDb, a body count of 44 in this one. Now that's considerably
that seems low.
That seems low to you? I mean, they've got
body count for the Predator specifically?
No. Well, no, that's for the whole movie. They have 28 given to the Predator.
Because I was going to say, like, the subway scene alone seems like more than that.
Well, they're going 28 by the Predator, 7 by Danny Glover.
Okay. I mean, he gets 4 in the opening scene with that trunk shotgun of his.
He sure does. There's so much I want to talk about, but the character, well, we'll jump to it as we talk about. The character of Lieutenant Mike Harrigan is basically like they just went, what if Danny was just both characters from Lethal Weapon in one character?
Yes, correct.
He is just Riggs and Murtaugh combined into one man.
He's more Riggs than he is Murtaugh, to be fair.
He is more Riggs in this, actually. It is almost because the opening scene is a total Lethal Weapon Riggs move when he puts the Kevlar vest on the window and spins the car out. That should be Mel doing that, and then you would have Danny Glover going, Riggs! What you doing, Riggs? You crazy! There's the point when he's running around yelling for Jerry in the subway, and I'm like, that is the exact same inflection as Riggs! He's going, Jerry! Jerry, where you at?
Imagine seeing Mel Gibson getting his head and spine torn out as Danny Glover's running down the subway track.
I wonder if Joel Silver was like, what if we just put the Lethal Weapon boys after the Predator? Like, did he ever just think about, like, you know what, just fucking he comes to L.A. and he meets Riggs and Murtaugh. They're different studios.
His character could have just, like, fully been replaced with Mel Gibson,
yeah,
right?
And it would have been the banter of it and stuff like that. Although, I mean, Bill Paxton in this movie. It's like, hey, do you love what he did in Aliens but wish it was 10 times bigger? Meet this character. But
I actually like his character more in this movie than I do in Alien.
he's certainly more competent. I mean, one of the things I like about this character is he actually is pretty good at his job while
I
being
like
like
his
a wild.
specialty runner is very
Yeah.
funny.
He adds a lot to this movie. He brings so much charm to this thing. Because he's just, I mean, Bill Paxton, we talked about any of this, but legitimately one of my favorite actors because the guy was just, could do anything. It's like, what do you want me to be? The funny side guy in this? Great. Then he can turn around and be the hero guy and other stuff like Twister. You know, it's crazy. But this was not originally developed as a Danny Glover vehicle. That I know that will shock
Shocker.
you. The idea, of course, was to bring Arnold back. The idea was always to have this urban police aspect to it, but the original script for this had Arnold in the Gary Busey part of the story. Not that, because obviously he became a different character. But the idea was Arnold, now working for the government, goes to LA, teams up with a streetwise cop.
And together they hunt the predator.
Right. That would have been the thing.
Interesting play. I mean, obviously, the whole turn on this movie of the government isn't there to stop drug dealers; they're there to hunt the predator.
That is actually my favorite thing in the script. I think that is the best idea in it, is that being the sequel idea of government found out about this, now they're tracking these things.
And look, it raises some big questions
Sure.
about the intelligence levels of both the predator and the government, which we can
Yes.
get into as we get into
Yes,
the plot.
of course. I think Arnold would have been certainly presented much more competently, probably, than Gary Busey's character.
Maybe I hope so, but again, that sounds like a different movie than this one.
I think that's why I say he was in the Gary Busey aspect of the plot, not you know.
yeah.
And obviously that character would have been the main character in that. But Arnold, according to different things, I go with the I'm inclined to believe the money reason is why he's not in this. One of the producers said it was a matter of $250,000. That Arnold wanted more for it, and when they wouldn't, he was like, then forget it. And Arnold was more like, no, it was just scheduling. I'm inclined to believe it was the money thing.
It sounds like such a low number now compared to like what Robert Downey Jr. is
I know,
paid
right.
for fucking Iron Man or something.
Yeah, like a difference of it. Yeah, now they wouldn't even question it. Well, I mean, actually, though, now they would have signed him up for 5 movies on the first movie, of course.
Sure.
You know,
Yeah,
that's a big difference as to then.
I'm sure Amber Mid-Thunder signed a 3-picture deal when she signed up for Prey.
Yeah, I think you just have to now. That's just, it doesn't matter what you do, actually. If you're in something that even has the remote possibility of sequels, we got to get you locked in. Over an additional $250,000, which the studio refused to pay him.
Which, knowing Joe Silver, honestly, yeah, sounds about right.
Absolutely. So then their next move was okay. Schwarzenegger's out. Joel Silver goes, I just made a movie called Roadhouse. Patrick Swayze versus the Predator. That was their next big idea. They wanted Swayze to be this cop character. Now,
Swayze had to go make Ghost.
Swayze was injured, according to the thing, because he had hurt himself doing the fight scenes for Roadhouse, and I think did go do Ghost because he's like, yeah, I got really hurt doing that last action thing, so let me maybe calm down a little bit. And ended up being the right choice because Ghost was a massive hit and this thing underperformed. So, you know, it worked out.
Yeah, they're Predator 2 and Ghost same year, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Very different movies. But
Very different
But
movies.
Ghost, weirdly, Ghost was which is, I say weirdly only now because it's like, Ghost was a romantic drama that had like a mild supernatural element to it, and yet was a runaway massive phenomenon, which just wouldn't happen today. I don't even think you could get Ghost made at a studio.
I mean, maybe Netflix.
Yeah, it'd have to be like at a streamer, but not as a blockbuster, you know, studio film that came out in theaters by any means. But that thing was huge. Anyway, my favorite thing is and if you were listening to the Action Shelf, you'll be happy to know that I can bring back this segment, which is Tales of Seagal.
No, what?
Yes, the next person
No.
after Swayze said no. The next person they went to was Steven Seagal, who said,
Thank God.
but this is such a great Seagal story because, of course, he goes, "I like the script, but I got a big note. I don't want him to be a cop. He's a psychiatrist, but he also knows martial arts."
Oh my God, Seagal is such a lunatic. Look, see, this is late 80s, early 90s Seagal. So
Yeah.
have we made
I think
Under Siege yet?
It would have been, I believe, Under Siege would have been the reason they were considering him for. No, Under Siege is 2 years later. Man, this movie is so weirdly placed. So he's done Above the Law at this point.
And that's it?
He had done Above
in
the
terms of
Law.
big mainline.
Yeah, Above the
Seagal
Law,
stuff.
because he does Above the Law in 88, and then Marked for Death and Hard to Kill are both 90.
Wow.
So he's
So look, undeniably that is like peak era Seagal if you want to.
Oh God, yeah. I
consider
mean,
that.
the run of Above the Law, Marked for Death, Hard to Kill, Out for Justice, and Under Siege. That's the thing, man. I mean, Under Siege 2 is the end of his run, of course.
Sure.
Yeah.
And that is like where he becomes like, okay, Seagal's weird notes begin creeping into the movies.
Yeah, I mean,
to
the
movie's detriment.
I mean, on Deadly Ground in '94, when he got to write and direct a movie, was where they were like, okay, yeah, no, he had just done Above the Law, but Above the Law that's his first movie, came out of nowhere, huge hit. So I mean, it actually makes more sense to me that he's not as known of a quantity, but that they went to him going like, this is gonna be the next guy, this is gonna be the next action hero, so let's get him in Predator.
Now, is the statement? I'm guessing you're reading this off the trivia section of IMDb.
Yes.
Does it say that that disagreement with the studio in terms of his note about it being a psychologist who knows karate?
Yes. That was yeah.
That was the straw that made it so he did not star in this movie.
That was where he and Stephen Hopkins apparently really were like at an impasse.
They came to loggerheads over that.
Yeah, where it's just like Stephen Hopkins being like, we can't do that, and Seagal being like, well, then forget it. So instead, he goes and makes 2 movies where he plays just a cop.
I was gonna say, okay, on a narrative level, how do you rewrite this movie if the main character is a psychologist? At best, FBI criminal profiler.
I think
is that what the angle is?
I think that was what he was going for. Yeah, he was like a psyops spy guy. Kind of.
Okay, I mean, look, that makes a little bit more sense because, okay, if you've got a criminal profiler trying to figure out the methodology of the Predator, right?
Yeah.
That's an interesting take.
Yeah, but that's I mean, that would require
totally different movie.
Yeah. It would require basically a page 1 rewrite, right? That's the thing. And I think they were like, oh, we meant go film this in a couple months.
Right. Script is locked. We have everyone else.
I gotta say though, for them to land on Danny Glover sort of last minute, pretty good for this movie. Because I will say that even the fairly negative reviews at the time, everybody was like, yeah, but Glover's fucking great in it.
I mean, look, I will have my nitpicks and complaints about this film, and boy, howdy do I.
Sure.
But the cast, I don't think is part.
No, I think actually pretty much everyone in this is a really solid actor who has done. They got a bunch of real pros in this thing. You know, I mean,
So let's see. Danny Glover's coming off of Lethal Weapon 2 at this point.
Yeah, which once again you gotta keep in mind, Lethal Weapon big, Lethal Weapon 2 gigantic. Lethal Weapon 2 is mass, and that was the big. The interesting thing, Danny Glover was really keen to do this because he was quoted as saying, you don't see a lot of black leads in these types of movies. You don't really get black guy fighting supernatural force or whatever. So I think that's really important that I be out there doing that. And shitty at the time. Keep in mind, it's still too late for this attitude, but the studio was like, ooh, that's going to hurt us in some markets, though. A black guy is the main character. And then Joel Silver basically had to convince them, well, they love him in those Lethal Weapon movies. And so they sort of reluctantly were like, okay, but we're taking it on faith. This isn't going to kill us in certain territories.
Mm-hmm. Which, I mean, ultimately, it didn't. I think what...
No, that has nothing... I don't think that had anything to do with it.
A bizarre tone and a somewhat haphazard script.
And also yes. And I think, which all adds up to, I just don't think it was the Predator movie people were clamoring for. I think the second they didn't have Arnold, it was an uphill battle.
Yeah. And look, obviously, I think the natural progression of Predator goes from jungle to city. I think that makes perfect sense for a sequel.
100%. Yeah, no, I think that is the best idea. I totally get why Fox was like, yes, let's totally change the dynamic.
And the framing of cops and gangsters being like the warriors that the Predator has to hunt, also interesting in baseline.
Yeah.
I think the first stumbling block this movie jumps into is the framing of this
Future?
almost like post-apocalyptic gang war that we're thrown into.
This movie was it came out in 1990, but takes place in 1997.
I didn't catch that at all.
There's just one quick thing at the beginning. Los Angeles, 1997. So it is the future. It is the near future, which is why everything kind of like they have guns with these laser scopes on them and stuff like that, which are like kind of real but sort of future-y. Like it's a weird choice. That has always been the most baffling choice to me. Is like, I don't know, man. Los Angeles had enough problems in 1990 that you could have just said it. You didn't have to, but for some reason they needed to obfuscate. And that's why the RoboCop thing really stood out to me this time.
Well, and I was thinking Escape from LA the whole time.
Oh, yeah. I mean, any of that sort of, urban center has fallen to crime rates. Is I mean, we were talking before about, a couple years later they'll make Judge Dredd or Demolition Man. Demolition Man is, LA fell so much that it's been rebuilt as this utopia.
Right.
So, I mean, that's definitely like in the water or whatever. That's in the pop culture pool at this time is we've got to do something about crime. We're having talks about, because we're in the election that Clinton will win eventually, which leads us to like the assault weapons. There's just a lot of talk. The next Lethal Weapon movie, actually, Lethal Weapon 3, is all about gangs, street gangs of LA. Crips and Bloods. That wasn't a water gun; it was a machine pistol, Raj. Sorry.
But another like fascinating take on this movie is this idea of a gang war that is in the near future, but also like has no basis in the reality that we're living in.
Something tells me that was
what is it? Venezuelans versus Jamaicans?
Yeah, which is just not a. I don't even know what that is. I don't know
foreign countries that are known for gangs and drug.
And trafficking. both of them have massively immigrated to Los Angeles at this point.
Guess.
Yeah, in this imaginary world. I don't know what has happened to the country that's led to this. I do think that was probably a studio note of going like, whoa, back off being too prescient. All right, this is a fun time summer movie. Okay, we don't want to actually talk about, which I do commend Lethal Weapon 3 for actually just doing that and going like, yeah, we can seriously talk about gangs and still be a fun police movie, but also have, leave at least a kernel of thought about the real world.
Yeah, and look, when this movie is released, we're like, I don't know, a year or so out from the whole Rodney King riots and like everything that happened there.
I mean,
what did I just see that revolved around those riots?
I mean, a lot.
There's a movie.
A lot of
There's
stuff.
a movie that like just came out that's like a heist movie with
Tyrese.
Ray Liotta.
Yeah, Tyrese and Ray Liotta have a movie that's just called 1992.
Yeah. I just saw that in theaters. That was really good.
Oh, did you see it? I want to see it. Yeah. I've heard
it was a solid crime thriller.
Yeah, I want to see that. That's Tyrese trying to be like, hey man, I can act.
But like that's a movie that has something to say about like racial tensions in Los Angeles in the early 90s.
Right.
This movie, not so much.
No, because like we're talking about, everything is obfuscated. Even though Jamaicans and Venezuelans are, of course, real cultures, they're not prescient to what they're actually talking about here. And they are, I mean, they are cartoon visions of them when you've got the Jamaican gang rolling around in a big caddy with weed smoke pouring out of it.
And like their whole like voodoo aesthetic that they've got going on is so.
The guy's
this
literally rolling bones. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's not beat around the bush. This movie's a little racist.
Yeah, it's certainly stereotypical at the very least. Yeah. But yeah, but
between all the Venezuelans with like bad teeth
yeah,
and like stereotypical, almost
it's
like Speedy Gonzalez accents that they're speaking in.
yeah, but it's just so weird because it's L.A. and it's Venezuelans, not Mexicans. That makes no sense. Mexico's right
I mean, look,
there.
we can't be talking about cartels that actually exist,
No,
John.
that's the thing about that is
And look, I know that there is like a lot of organized Venezuelan crime. Don't get me
oh
wrong.
no, but the idea that that's like running the streets of L.A. is a little weird.
And why they landed on these two, I think, is just like
and they're
they
not
threw a dartboard
yeah.
for like scary brown people.
They're
countries,
not
and this is what we
African
landed
American
on.
gangs. Like the idea that like yeah, LA has black gangs that had to come there is like what?
Yeah.
What are you talking about? Like I said, I just want to know what happened to the immigration in this country that led to this massive influx of Venezuelan and Jamaican people in
Well,
LA.
John, when the goddamn Democrats take over the White House, they're
That's
just going
right.
to open the floodgates.
No borders, man. That's what they're saying, right?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Clearly, that's what people are saying.
That
And
is
if you
what
haven't heard it,
indeed.
you haven't been listening.
I've heard a lot of people say that is absolutely right.
Yeah, they say that people are saying it, John. That's how I know it's true.
Yeah. So
Because sarcasm is a dead art in this country,
Yeah.
I'm going to say I am joking.
yes, of course. The other thing this adds that also brings into it that RoboCop feel is the media in this, right? And this thing hardcore, which at the time, of course, there was a show I'm sure you remember as a kid called Hard Copy that is very similar to what they're doing here, hosted by Tony Pope, played by Morton Downey Jr., who was I'm not gonna say journalist because that's insulting to the term journalism. But was a media personality. He was the sort of first. I think he's been forgotten probably by time. Younger listeners probably don't know Morton Downey Jr. He was the first of the really outrageous pundits. He had a talk show where he had people on and he would yell at people.
Yeah, I think like how to describe kind of like
He was sort of like
rage baity. Like
yeah,
I don't know.
He was kind of Bill O'Reilly crossed with Jerry Springer, right? Like
that's a good way of putting it.
He would have people on who would fight each other, but unlike Jerry Springer, who would sort of ringmaster that, he would get into it with people. He would have people on and then berate them while also constantly smoking. That was his big thing. So he always had a cigarette. Shockingly, he died of lung cancer. I know. Who would have thought? There's a really great documentary about him that came out a couple years ago that I can't remember the name. It might just be Morton. I don't know. But I highly recommend people check that out if you want to know what's interesting. But he's a guy who I think he's kind of been forgotten a little bit by pop culture, but his influence on media is still radically felt to this day.
Well, because he was the first stage in your like Rush Limbaugh's and your like that aggressive, I'm angry, we're angry together, let us find something to be angry at and shout at.
The difference was he wasn't as politically partisan as a lot of those people have become now. He was just sort of generally outraged.
Yeah. So when you have him as like a bead through this movie shouting at the police and the feds and everybody, it's like he has no angle other than outrage, right? And it's outrage at no matter what it is in front of him.
When Gary Busey sends Adam Baldwin to destroy his camera and stuff, like, hey man, the people got a right to know.
But like he's shouting at the cops for getting in his way, but then as soon as one of the cops dies, he's like, oh, one of our brave cops.
It's one of those things where I think at the time people would have called him conservative, and now we would find him fairly liberal. You know what I mean? Like, it's yeah. So, okay. So, but having him in here at the time, that cameo would have read in a much more impactful way in 1990. Obviously,
it would have been more.
They got the guy. That's that guy on TV who yells.
It's like whenever Wolf Blitzer cameos in a movie.
He's got to have a record. I feel like I see him in every movie, including the best being Mission Impossible Fallout. That's
I was gonna say it's either him or Anderson Cooper, right?
one or both. That's Anderson Cooper is the guy with the line of "Thank God Gotham City had been evacuated and no one's there when the
Yeah.
Doomsday fight happens."
Yeah.
Yeah, one or both of them are in every movie, being the news guy. But so that adds a whole aspect to this. I think, once again, speaking to this movie, they don't do enough with that, or that nothing really comes of the media angle of it. And that's where, like, once again, I think this is a dumber movie than RoboCop, because I mean, that's the thing where it's like that's baked into this satire of culture. And in this movie, they're
Right.
like, "Hey, we're doing that thing," and you're like, "Okay, but does that really come to anything?" Like I said, I love this movie. I watch this movie a lot. It's super fun, but yes, it is it's pretty, as a
Yeah.
movie. What does it have anything to say? Not really. You come for the cool kills, but it feels like it thinks it's saying something. I think that's the big thing. If it was just actively dumb fun, which I think like Predators is.
Yeah. Well, and Predator is an elevation of one man army, sort of one man versus nature, man versus self,
Yeah.
like stuff. This is what if one man was somehow able to avoid being exploded just long enough to kill the predator.
Yeah.
My biggest complaint with this movie is when Danny Glover gets shot in the chest by the Predator rocket and doesn't die instantly.
Well, we already talked about, even in the first movie, they're pretty inconsistent about what those Predator rockets are doing to people.
That's fair. Yeah. But like somehow a bulletproof vest is stopping that? No.
Well, but it's a 1997 bulletproof vest, so it's gotten
But we
better.
see
Yeah,
the
no.
guys in the beginning of the movie with bulletproof vests
No.
whose chests have literally exploded.
He's got the same plot armor that Arnold had in the first movie.
I know.
Yeah, no, it's but man, he unlike Arnold, he gets the respect of the Predators, man. I've always loved the end of this movie where they're just like,
Yeah.
game recognized, game, Danny Glover. And that was a big thing where Danny Glover he still mentions this is like, that's one of my favorite movies I've done, because he goes at the end of the movie when they're all, and I'm like, yeah, man, I killed one of you, and they're like, you're cool with us, Dan. He also goes, that was the best shape I've ever been in my life in that movie.
He's scrambling around on some stuff in this film.
Which is
so,
because
I believe it.
I'm sure he thought was a blast, because he was the straight-laced one in Lethal Weapon. He didn't get to do that stuff. He wore a suit, and would shoot people, but like would stand there and shoot somebody with his revolver. It was Mel who was diving and rolling and leaping through fire and stuff like that. So I'm sure that is why he relished, like, this is my chance to be the guy, the action. Because the other thing you gotta keep in mind too, Danny Glover's always one of those guys who played older than he's playing like 10 years older in Lethal Weapon. He wasn't actually an old man. Like, he and Mel are about the same age, but he's supposed to be the old veteran. I'm too old for this shit in Lethal Weapon, and you're like, yeah. He's like,
Because he was like 35 in the first.
He's like,
Lethal Weapon
yeah,
movie?
he's like maybe around 40, but he's playing 55. Yeah. That's the thing is, So I think that's the thing too, where he was like, yeah, man, like, I'm still in the prime of my life. I've been playing this old guy. Now I get to throw off the thing. I get to carry a fucking Desert Eagle with a laser on it.
My favorite thing is at the beginning of this movie when he's got his trunk full of weapons.
It's
he
the best.
lifts up the Desert Eagle and goes, "No, too."
Yeah, I need something bigger. I love any movie that opens up with this cop has just got, and he's digging through, and then he goes, oh, wait, there's a shotgun Velcroed to the trunk lid. Perfect.
That shotgun.
Yeah, he's got like a...
How does the Predator survive that? Let's not worry about it. He's got the same plot armor as Danny Glover.
Well, I will say that actually what a gun does... this movie did make me go like, what happens to it? Because sometimes bullets are just bouncing off of him. I guess it has to do with what armor he's wearing, because then other times when Danny Glover opens up with the shotgun, he survives, but he is getting hit.
It seems to have something to do with the invisibility, right?
Yes.
Because when he's invisible, he's basically bulletproof.
So that implies it's not only affecting like as a camouflage, but it's putting some sort of field around him or something, right?
Maybe. Because like Bill Paxton in the subway scene is literally firing point blank straight into his chest. And the Predator's just casually walking forward.
I mean, and the bullets are
him.
literally like Superman, like pew, boom, pew, boom. off of him. So yeah, I guess
it's gonna be like a shield, like the Covenant from Halo or something.
I think that's that's new to this movie. We didn't see that in the first one.
Well, there was plenty of people firing at the Predator and like realistically should have hit the Predator.
Right. But we don't see it actively bounce off of him. It just seems like they're missing. Though this movie is like, Predator had people just shooting hundreds of rounds wildly. Hold my beer, says Predator too. Because that first scene when he goes in and attacks the gang in the gangster's penthouse, they fire off like 250 rounds in that scene.
Double Uzi Guy is my favorite character.
Double Uzi Guy rules. Double Uzi Guy rules. And Double Uzi Guy is a stuntman who Harry Kinji is the actor's name.
I'm so glad you know his name.
And his credited character in this is El Scorpio, which they do not say. They never call him. Do they say El Scorpio?
The Venezuelan gang is called the Scorpions.
Okay, so he is just called El Scorpio. In the credits.
And the Jamaican gang, I think, is called the Voodoo Boys, but I may be conflating that with Cyberpunk 2077.
Hey, man, I mean, the kind of script we're dealing with here, they should be called the Voodoo Boys. But here's the thing about if you watch as many of these movies as I have, this guy is in every one of these. In fact, he is actually one of the guerrilla soldiers that they kill in the first Predator. So he technically is a returning. This guy gets killed in 2 different Predator movies. But
good for him.
He's just a guy. I know him as as Mugger from Batman Returns. Of course. He's the guy mugging the girl when Catwoman first comes out as Catwoman and slices his face with her claws. It's this guy. And so he just every time I see him, I'm like, oh, that's that guy. And he's been in all the Lethal Weapon movies as punks and stuff like that. He plays Thug Wheelman in Last Action Hero. I mean, just
classic.
Yeah, he's in a lot of the Joel Silver. If you watch action movies from this era, and he's done stunts in everything. I mean everything. Like he's still doing. He just did stunt work for Fast X. This guy's still out there.
Whoa.
Yeah,
that's actually shocking considering he is how old? Let's see. He was born in 1943.
Yeah.
So he's 81.
Yep. And he's still out there, folks. Still
Holy
doing
crap.
stunts for huge Hollywood movies.
He's got to be just on the coordination team, right? There's no way.
I mean, could still be doing car stunts, maybe. I don't know. I mean, he was a stunt driver on Ant-Man and the Wasp, and on Venom. He did some stunts for Ford versus Ferrari. Yeah. Still out there, man.
Him.
In 2014, he was Nick Fury's stunt double in The Winter Soldier.
Wow. Look, like that's a job where you either die young or you live long enough to basically be in charge of the industry, right?
Yeah. He was married to Lindsay Wagner, the Bionic Woman.
Oh, good for him.
Holy shit, I didn't know that. And also, I think one of the things, okay, I'm just down the Henry Kinji rabbit hole, of course. But his ancestry is Cherokee, Seminole, Japanese American, African American, French, and Irish. Hence, in these action movies, they can just have him play anything.
He is perfectly global.
Yeah, that's the thing of it. He has such a mix of things that in this he can be Venezuelan, or he can, right? He could. I've seen him play many a Native American, which he also is. It's like, but yeah, I mean, like this guy. I've seen this guy on T.J. Hooker. It's like, he's just one of those faces. There's like a handful of guys. Why am I blanking on the other guy's name? Al. Oh, what's his name? He's an Asian guy with long hair and a big goatee, and he's in every one of these Joel Silver movies as well. He's one of the bad guys in Die Hard. And once again, you just start to recognize these faces when you watch enough of these movies. Al Leong, you've seen him. You've seen him killed by every action hero. He plays Genghis Khan in Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure.
Yes, okay.
Yeah. And once again,
I'm like that, you've got me.
Yeah. I think Mel and Danny have both killed him across multiple Lethal Weapon movies. It's like... Yeah,
this is a good movie for goons that stand out slightly.
Oh, and that's a Joel Silver specialty. That's a Joel Silver thing. Absolutely. Everyone is super memorable in this movie.
Because you want the Predator's like murder of them to also be memorable, right? And I will say that is something where this movie succeeds. This movie adds so many toys to the Predator toy box that are basically just there for a creative and fun way of killing people.
He's throwing a lot more shit in this movie than he was in the first one.
He's got darts, he's got spears, he's got that weird wind-up net that cubes people.
That's which I love. But no, this definitely feels more like the first movie was just a movie. This is where they're thinking franchise, right? They're thinking like, okay, the Predator's got gadgets now. Like he had some gadgets, but they all sort of came out of the necessity of the plot of the first movie. Here they're like, we're starting from gadgets and working backwards.
The moment you get to the final scene of this movie and all the other Predators show up, and they're not all just like carbon copies of the same suit or even the suit from Predator 1, when they all have like weird little eccentricities to them and different mask variations and piercings and armor like configurations, you're like, oh shit, they have a whole toy line ready for this.
Oh, apparently they talk about Stan Winston was just going nuts making this movie.
Oh, I'm sure.
He was just like, and this and that and over here and doing this and just the amount of design he put into this.
I mean, even when it comes down to the Predator's like med kit, which we saw in the first movie, but it was way more simple. It was like an injection needle and something to cauterize a wound. And this, it's a whole like, I'm going to take some glass and some plaster and melt it into a weird blue goo that I'm going to spread all over my wounds.
I mean, one of my favorite things in this too is him cleaning all the gore off of the skull so it's pristine for his collection.
He fucking buffs it.
Yeah. Yeah, looking good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and
got this on a wall back on my spaceship.
This, which of course that became the whole thing, is the wall of trophy skulls, and just literally reading the behind the scenes of this, they just went, that'd be kind of cool if we threw like a alien skull in there, right?
And here's
it's a total toss off by the Stan Winston studio, just going, go for it.
But here's the thing. I guess now's as good a time as any to start getting into this.
Yeah.
And we'll get into it more when we get to the main title movie itself.
Of course. Yeah.
In terms of the history of Alien v Predator, right?
Right.
The first Alien v Predator thing was the Dark Horse comic of that name, Aliens versus Predator.
Of course. Iconic.
That premiered in 1989, a year before this movie came out.
Interesting, but had they, where in the making of this versus that coming out, I'm wondering, because it seems like it's parallel thinking almost.
That is what I'm going to do more research on.
Yeah.
Before we get to the Alien vs. Predator movie.
Because it sounds like
this movie comes out while that series is still going.
Right.
And it's 6 issues is the original miniseries. It was part of Dark Horse Presents, was an ongoing series.
Yes. So much. By the way, so many of your favorite things started in Dark Horse Presents. It's really interesting if you look it up.
Totally. I mean, that's where Hellboy got its start, right?
Yep. Time Cop.
Yeah, sure. So like that comic book series and this movie are being made at the same time. So there's got to be a discussion somewhere in Fox, in the bowels of the corporate overlords offices, where they're like, oh, we own both of these franchises. We already have Dark Horse Comics making Alien and Predator comics. That's already been a thing.
Yeah. See, that's the thing I can't figure out, because like in all the stuff I'm reading, it's that realization of like, well, we also own the rights to this, so why not? What they don't say is where the comic book fits into. They make it seem like this thing about when they're building the sets for this, they were just like, hey, why not?
Sure. And again, the idea that like, obviously the creation of these sets and the production of this movie predates its release date in November of 1990.
Right.
So like, where in the timeline do those two things
did somebody see this?
Is going to be a little bit faster than the movie.
Right, because like, did somebody from Fox see this and go, ooh, that's something, I'm going to get Dark Horse on the line? Because I can only imagine that Alien and Predator comic coming out at the same time would have helped this movie. I would think.
I mean, it's tough to tell. In the early 90s, obviously, we have this big collector's bubble in comic books that is about to burst, right? When is Death of Superman? 91, 92?
Yeah, in there, 94, 90. What? I don't know. The 90s all bleed together to me as we're learning on this episode.
That's fair.
Death of Superman was 1992.
1992. Okay.
December of 90.
So,
He was dead from December of 92 till October of 93.
what a time to be alive.
Dude, we were, man. I remember that. I followed that shit.
But the idea that this would have been like a big franchise like synergy, I don't know if that was necessarily on the same level as what we'd get with like Marvel and Star Wars stuff.
Oh, certainly
right?
not to that level. But it is interesting that immediately after this, like I said, Fox's thing was, we're not going to make Predator 3. Maybe we need to put these things together.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's interesting because they will make 2 more Alien movies before that happens. But basically, starting here, they are trying to merge these franchises.
Yeah, with mixed success outside of comics and tie-in novels.
I think mix is being generous. To think that either one of those movies works in any capacity.
Again, mixed success in terms of before that film.
Oh yeah. Oh yes. Yeah.
Because like you have comics, you have novels, you have a pretty sweet game.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have particular fandom for it from the game. Like that's the nostalgia for Alien versus Predator.
Right.
Yeah. So no, and I think that's interesting to think about is that they're already. But like we're saying, I think one of the reasons that didn't happen was, I mean, look at how long it took to get Superman and Batman in a movie together. Like it just wasn't the natural way things go together like they do now. Everything now is about these shared universes. But back then that was still like could we? Might that happen? I mean, Freddy versus Jason was the same thing. It's basically the exact same time you have this another studio going, can we put Freddy and Jason in a movie together? And that actually comes out before Alien versus Predator, I believe. I think Freddy versus Jason happened first.
You know more about the slashers than I, John.
Yeah.
I couldn't tell you.
I'm almost certain.
But yeah, we'll get more into that when we talk about Aliens versus Predator.
Yeah, but I'm saying it's an interesting thing that they're
it's
already
in the air as of this movie.
This is the first movie where they're starting to talk. Hold on. Yeah, it came out 1 year after Freddy versus Jason, Alien versus Predator. Freddy versus Jason kicked the door down.
I feel like that was something we were talking about as those movies were coming out. Was there another versus movie that happened right around then?
I'm trying to remember. I mean, it was because In the Air was at that point, because forever they were trying to make a Batman versus Superman movie forever. Mm-hmm. So you know, I'm trying to remember if something else was versus. I can't remember.
Monsters versus Aliens.
Cats versus Dogs.
Oh yeah, that movie exists.
Remember that? There were 2 of those movies.
Oh God,
They made a second one.
I'm trying to remember who was in that first one. Was it Jeff Goldblum?
Yes.
Wow.
Hey man, we all have lean years, you know.
That's fair.
Yeah. 2001's Cats versus Dogs. Jeff Goldblum as Professor Brody.
No boy.
Yeah.
Because his whole thing in that movie is that he's allergic to cats.
I think that's the idea, yeah.
And the cats are trying to kill him, and the dogs are trying to
because the cats are
defend
evil.
him.
Yeah.
Right, because he's invented like a cure for cat allergy, and the cats don't want that getting out. Boy, that movie's a weird one.
It was 2001, man. We didn't know what movies were. And this is what people tuned into the Predator 2 to talk about.
Look, the reason we can have some kind of divergence on this movie is that like beyond like just listing all the kills, there's not a ton of meat on this bones for this.
Well, but you do get stuff. I just want to talk about some scenes I love. I mean, I love when they find the Predator dart and he takes it to the police scientist, and she's like, "These elements aren't even on the periodic table."
Yeah, you know, like Elements B.
I love that though, because that's such a classic. Like, I love that this movie still plays like the characters are behind the eight ball, but we as an audience, of course, know, well, that's a predator. Also in the trivia, this is the first time they are referred to as predators by Gary Busey. We haven't talked at all about Busey. We got to talk some Busey on here. This is the Buse, man.
The Buse. Gary Busey is in this movie. His mouth is just as big as you think it is.
Hide my head, I gotta contain these giant choppers.
He's actually kind of like barely in this movie. I thought he was in more of it.
I had a similar thing. He actually isn't in it that much. He's one of the bad guys in the first Lethal Weapon. Played Mr. Joshua. He does the cool thing with the lighter on his arm. But so there's a Joel Silver guy. This is also the first movie he made after his horrific motorcycle accident where his brain was significantly damaged. So that's an interesting note in the trivia because you can kind of bifurcate his career by before and after that accident.
That's fair.
Because like when people talk about Gary Busey's crazy, it's like, no, he's legitimately brain damaged, not in a joking way. He's actually has damage to his brain. Right. It's incredible he wasn't killed in that accident. But yeah, shows
that he was able to come back to acting is astounding.
How did I have? I do have because people know who listen to this show know I love to talk about alternate castings, and I had here who Stephen Hopkins really wanted somebody else for this part.
Specifically for the FBI agent, not just like
for Keys. Yeah, once it became Keys specifically. John Lithgow. He really wanted John Lithgow, which would have been also does crazy, but a different energy of crazy.
I just can't see John Lithgow jumping out from between giant slabs of meat in a weird tinfoil costume with a freeze gun at the end of this movie. Like
I love so much that he's trying to freeze the Predator. And also that it just immediately goes to hell, the plan.
It's like, well, you're saying your tinfoil suits and freeze guns didn't work against the perfect killing machine?
I mean, I'm not sure I've ever seen a plan go south faster. These people get killed so fucking fast.
They have this baseline assumption that I find, again, let's start getting into Mike's like, boy, these characters are dumb moments. Because it starts...
Basically everyone other than Danny Glover is pretty stupid. And actually, weirdly, Bill Paxton's pretty smart, or he's smarter than you would think for being the idiot. Danny Glover's team of cops are generally pretty...
They're generally okay.
Yeah.
But
basically everyone else is an idiot, though.
So we have this government agency. They're tracking Predator stuff ever since the first movie, I guess, right?
I think that's the idea. Because they do the like previously on Predator, last movie, all this stuff happened.
Let's show the clips.
Yeah, here you go. Here we go. I think we got a clip. Do we have a clip? All right, roll it. Yeah.
And again, maybe I'm misremembering this, but I feel like the woman from the first movie was like in those clips originally.
Yeah, she's credited, but people talk about you can barely see her. But she does get a credit in the cast. She got paid for this movie.
All right, well, good for her.
Yeah, I mean, good for her. I don't think she really did anything, so that's basically money for nothing.
But so they're hunting this creature that is A, capable of interstellar travel, and B, hunts people.
Yeah.
And your plan is based only on the hearsay of a large Austrian man.
Yes. Which, by the way, I don't know if you saw this. This is my favorite thing, as always. Loved it. One of my other favorite things to talk about these movies is the novelizations of these movies. The novelization says what happened to Dutch.
Oh, what happened to Dutch?
A novelization written by Simon Hawke. Great name. It briefly covers the fate of Dutch in the first film. Keyes recalls memories of speaking with the battered major while infirmed in a hospital suffering from radiation sickness, which is an interesting note to me because it does start to go, well, if the metal is also different, I didn't really think of that explosion at the end as being nuclear as we would understand it because it's an alien race, but whatever. Dutch is said to have escaped from the hospital, never to be seen again. It tells a great deal of the story from the Predator's point of view as well.
See, that's interesting. I like that.
Such as getting into its humiliation of having its mask removed by Harrigan and its reasoning for not killing Cantrell due to its discovery of her pregnancy.
I feel like that's pretty clear in the movie.
Yeah.
Like, the Predator's vision zooms in on the second heartbeat.
And like then which further adds to this interesting thing we've talked about with like the Predator code.
Yeah, but the Predator code, like,
Well,
he's
it's
just
fast and loose.
killing people.
It's fast and
full
loose,
scale.
right? It's fast.
Yeah.
It has
Why
to
would
be.
he kill Danny?
Yeah.
Not Danny Glover, but the character played by Ruben Blades, which is
Love Ruben
another
Blades,
great
by the way. He's really wasted in this movie, I would say.
yeah.
Yeah, because he's a very good actor and he's in like 2 scenes. But hey, get that money, man. And he has one of the coolest names ever, which is Ruben Blades. But he fucking rules in Once Upon a Time in Mexico, if anybody has and should see that. And I guess he's
He's Fear the Walking Dead. Yeah.
Yeah, I've never really watched Fear the Walking Dead, so I don't know.
Did you like Walking Dead? Did you need more of it? Because there it is.
Well, there's 2 separate answers to those questions. I liked Walking Dead for a good while. Really liked it, yeah. And then I had enough of the first show, so I sure as hell didn't watch any of the other ones. The 18 spinoffs that are on now. What are there, like 3? They're like 3 or 4 now. It's crazy.
But anyway,
yes.
The fact that the government agents believe that they can get one over on the Predator, again, a technologically superior species, by their own words, they say, think of the technology we could reap from these things. The idea that like it has no way of modifying how it sees the world is just mind-boggling.
Yeah. Like I said, the Predator code, and I think this is just due to inconsistent writing, but each Predator has their own code, right? They have to. There can't be and actually, once again, it's something Shane Black tries to explain in his Predator movie.
This is why, like, in some of the fan discussion of this, the City Hunter is considered the cheeky asshole of the bunch.
Oh, he's a prick. This guy's a real piece of shit.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's another reason why the other Predators are so cool with Danny Glover. It's like, you killed that guy we didn't like anyway, right? Like,
did he use the want some candy line? Ugh, this guy.
Oh, this fucking guy, man. I get it. He's been giving us Predators a bad name, I gotta tell you.
I will say, this Predator, the City Hunter, also has like some of the creepier uses of the like, dialogue recording. I love the like,
yes,
Danny boy.
They really, like I said, this does feel like the schlockier movie. They take a lot of the aspects of the first movie and really indulge in them, whether that be the killings, the collecting of trophies, the taunting voice stuff. It really is just like, yeah, this is a horror movie, right? Like, and it's so interesting. We haven't talked much about Stephen Hopkins, who directed this movie. He got hired from on this, and I should have said this earlier when you mentioned the Freddy Krueger thing. Because they were so impressed by him directing Nightmare on Elm Street 5?
5. That's the one before A New Nightmare?
He did The Dream Child, yes.
Dream Child.
And I believe that is 5. Well, wait a minute. 3 is Dream Warriors. Yes. Yes, because 4 is Dream Master. 5 is Dream Child. Then New Nightmare. Okay, so he had done that with like no resources. Like they basically fucked that guy over big time on that movie, and we're like, yeah, you can't build any sets. You've got to get this done in 4 weeks, and he pulled something out. So they were very impressed by that and gave him this movie. But I think that makes a lot of sense, and I have a quote from him here that I think explains a lot of this movie. This was him recalling the movie years later. He goes, "It's so over the top. I just sort of went for it and made the biggest, boldest, loudest movie I could make. I was 29 years old. I was like a rampant child running around Los Angeles, blowing the shit out of everything and making things as bloody as possible."
I mean, look.
Yeah.
You fucking hit the bullseye on all that, I guess.
No, and but I also think that that's not just him. They hired him for a reason, and they were obviously cool with that. I think they knew they didn't have the cachet of Arnold, so they're like, let's lean into the Predator, and the Predator is bloody and crazy, and he looks nuts. And a weird thing, I was reading, as I often do, some of the contemporary reviews, particularly Roger Ebert, who we talked about championing the first film, did not like this one. But jumped onto one of the most interesting things. He really was offended by this movie. And he thought the Predator was racist. We talked about some of the other stuff, but he goes, the Predator is such a stand-in for a scary, violent black man. And I thought, that's an interesting... I kind of see what he's saying.
Not wrong with this movie. I mean, look, the whole aesthetic of the Predator is aping certain like
The dreads and stuff.
African and South Atlantic, like Jamaican, Haitian kind of vibes.
Which is interesting
them,
that
right?
was already the case before they got into that stuff in this movie.
Yeah.
But
This movie sort of highlights it in its portrayal of Jamaican gangsters.
well, and it's interesting because Kevin Peter Hall, we talked about, who played the Predator, this time based a lot of his movements off of African tribal dance. The City Predator, specifically, the City Hunter, was specifically based off of that.
yeah,
So I
don't know. Giving him a spear doesn't help.
No, the thing about it is, I think, like you're saying, is he's not wrong, but look, I mean, I think one of the reasons I was surprised is that the first time I've heard anybody directly say that. So I don't know that it's overt, and I don't know. And the Predator now has become so iconic as a design. I think now multiple movies and decades down the line, this movie you feel it I think you feel it the most because of its setting and that it's already around all these other stereotypical caricatures of people and very sort of one-note comic book depictions of cultures.
Well, and again, you have to put it in the context of its time. We're talking early 90s LA, in which like racial tensions are in fact pretty high. So
Oh,
a
yeah.
movie that like has this like predominantly black culture coded outsider coming in and murdering everyone, like you can see where that leads from, even if it doesn't necessarily come from a place of overt racism on the part of the filmmakers or Stan Winston, who is like the creature designer here.
Right.
Like you can see how that can all be put together.
No,
and,
they've
systems of racism exist and are expressed inadvertently all the time.
They've mixed up this stew.
Yeah.
And when you put this Predator thing, that's what I'm saying. I think this is the one where it shows, simply because it's like, oh, I didn't think that in the first movie, but now that I see this thing standing next to these things,
Yeah.
And I don't think it's something,
again,
I don't think it's an omnipresent thing in the franchise, but this movie in particular is. Well, because it does. This movie is also, once again, I don't think when we say this, I don't think this movie is overtly racist, but I think it is a thing where it wants to talk about stuff, but not really. And so by invoking some levels of seriousness, like there's a responsibility. If you're going to try to talk about that, maybe you should actually try to be a little bit more serious about it instead of being so frivolous and silly.
Yeah, I don't know. I would like to do some more reading on this, and I think going forward I will, because I think there is a solid take to be made on like the Predator creature design is playing in some racist stereotypes in terms of like the tribal headhunter stereotype
Sure.
as like a caricature, and obviously the Predator pushes that beyond human. Like,
well,
we're not dealing with a guy in blackface here. We're dealing with a weird crab-mouthed alien.
Yeah,
So,
because that's the thing is I think there's definitely a piece of that, and then it's glommed onto this and this and this and this. You know,
yeah,
it's obfuscated.
Again, I would love to do
enough
some
that-
reading on this. If any of our listeners have any suggestions for,
I've never really heard anybody.
the Predator franchise through the lens of race relations, I'd be curious to read them.
Yeah, I've never really seen anybody talk about that. I'm sure somebody has.
Because the Predator is not necessarily a franchise that has achieved.
You don't think there's a lot of doctoral thesis about these movies?
I mean,
Predator
I would
2
love to read
specifically?
one, honestly.
Somebody probably has. I always assume there's just so many like film school people out there and stuff that somebody's written about almost everything, no matter how dumb it may seem. Yeah, so I do think, as we talk about, I think this is a real interesting linchpin in this franchise discussion. Because it is sort of, number one, it is testing the waters in general of, hey, is this a franchise? Like, Predator was a hit movie. We made a sequel. It's interesting that it even continues because I think definitely at the time, this movie has grown a cult fan base that I count myself amongst. But at the time, it was definitely like, eesh, I don't know. It didn't bomb, but it didn't do great. And so I
How
think
did it do box office wise? I don't
that's
even know.
that's what I was looking to see. I mean, Hopkins even talked about this further in that thing where it's like it was big opening weekend and then it kind of fell off, but it did enough. It made $57 million on a $20 million budget. So that's not.
Okay.
I mean, that's the thing but it didn't set the world on fire. It wasn't what they wanted because we're definitely entering the period of time where sequels are making more. I mean, that used to be the opposite, of course. Was always the idea that you'd spend less on the sequels and they were cash-ins that would make you some money but less. Now we're definitely in the realm of following Lethal Weapon 2 and Ghostbusters 2 and all that stuff. Is like we expect these things to make more money.
Well, it's a bifurcation in the 90s, right? Because by the same token, you have these sequels released in theaters that are expected to do so well. Alternatively, you have sequels that are being put straight to video.
Which is interesting. You actually feel like I'm surprised there wasn't a third Predator that went straight to video. This does feel like a franchise where that might have happened.
Totally. And the fact that we don't get another movie with the Predator in it until Alien versus Predator after this?
It's kind of crazy that it still has the kind of cachet to happen because, like, obviously we keep getting Alien movies throughout the 90s, or at least two more, but that's enough. It's interesting that the Predator was still well enough remembered for them to really go for Alien versus Predator.
I think a lot of that has to do with, I mean, comic books are a part of it. Iconography and like being able to recognize something culturally is a part of that. There is an iconography that comes with the Predator monster that is pretty singular in terms of its design. Like the blank mask with the, like, again, maybe you could argue slightly racist tropes of like jungle hunter, like
The
people
dreads.
hunting accoutrement.
Yeah, but then obviously the design then when you take off the mask and it's the weird crab mouth, as we talked about, like all that stuff became iconic. It sold action figures. I think it's interesting you bring up the comics as they talk about this. I think this is one of the first times we see this really is the whole subway thing they just took from the Dark Horse Predator comic. The whole subway attack.
Yeah.
They talked about, they were just like, that's cool, put it in the movie. So we're now seeing, we do this other podcast about Star Wars comics. I don't think George Lucas was poring over those for inspiration for Star Wars movies. So I think it's an interesting thing where like the snake is eating its tail sort of thing, where it's like, hey, this is a thing based on our thing, but they had a good idea, so let's have us take that. And of course now everything is all jumbled up in terms of media, and we're grabbing all kinds of stuff from all over the place. That's pretty common. But this has got to be one of the first instances where they were like, shit, those guys at the comic had a great idea for a set piece. We should just do that.
You know what's surprising to me, and something I'm literally just finding out now, there weren't actually a lot of Predator comics between Predator 1 and 2. The Predator comics start being produced in 1989.
Okay.
So, like, right off the bat, I mean, there is literally a comic book called Predator Concrete Jungle that comes out in 89.
Yeah, I think that's where they took the subway thing from.
Yeah.
Which, of course, also point out is LA does not have a subway system. I guess that happened, and they have an elevated train.
Mark Verheiden writing, Chris Warner, Ron Randall. Oh, there's some.
I mean, yeah, they got top. Those are all top Dark Horse guys. But yeah,
And of course, there was a Predator 2 adaptation.
Of course.
Book. Predator Big Game comes out in 91. Oh, Bloody Sands of Time, I actually remember. Well, that was a Dan Barry, Mike Richardson joint.
Maybe skip that then. No offense, but I gotta say,
offense. But
Mike Richardson, better editor
some...
maybe than writer.
Yeah.
They did a lot of. I'm looking at. They did a lot of Predator comics, didn't they?
Oh yeah, no, and like I said, I think there's part of what sustained Predator in the 14 years between this movie and Alien versus Predator is that the iconography was out there and being recognized by at least subcultures that were beginning to gain traction in terms of like internet fandom. Obviously, the 90s is a big flourishing of that. I mean, look, you and I are Oregon natives. We can go over to Milwaukee to the Dark Horse offices and see the xenomorph in the window there.
I think there's a Predator there too, isn't there?
for the longest time, the comic book shop that I would go to in Clackamas Town Center, our local mall,
Yeah.
would have an Alien and a Predator like
Yeah.
full statues
Yeah.
in there.
Yeah. No, I mean, the Alien and Predator are both just omnipresent in our lives as fans of genre stuff. You know, they are representative of a certain kind of horror sci-fi monster movie. And I think it's interesting. The other big thing this movie does is when they throw Danny Glover the flintlock pistol at the end, establishes a like, oh shit. The first time, that was not the first time they came here in the first movie. And really, I mean, from what I've heard of Dan Trachtenberg talked about, that flintlock is basically the impetus for the creation of Prey.
I mean, look, I think that is a very potent idea, is that like these creatures have been around for who knows how long, and in different comic books and novels they've played around with like,
no, because I'm
like back to like the samurai era.
I'm looking at I'm looking at the list that you were also just looking at of the Predator comics, and like, yeah, Predator, Hell Come a Walkin' during the Civil War, and you know, it's like
totally.
There's all kinds of stuff like that is very fun to play in, and that really starts with this movie, because we know nothing about the Predator other than there's an alien that lands here and hunts people in the first movie. This is like a lot of the sequels is going, all right, if this is going to be an ongoing thing, we need some lore now.
Yeah, and the lore that we build into this movie is that A, it's this whole species of hunters. B, they occasionally come back around to Earth to hunt.
Right. And they've been doing so for
this movie also
years.
implies that they do it on a bunch of other worlds as well.
Yes. And then we'll get to Predators expands that massively.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Anyway,
when we get to one of the Predator game worlds.
Yeah, which is, I mean, that was the thing too, where people go like, it's not the home world. It's a whole thing.
We have yet to see the Utja homeworld.
Oh yeah, we did. Where did we figure out that came from? Has that been established at this point?
The novelization of the comic book.
So probably not then.
The novelization has not happened as of the release of this film.
Okay,
no.
So they're still just Predators, because like I said, this is the first time that somebody canonically calls them Predators in the thing, which belongs to Mr. Busey. Okay, let me get some highs and lows here.
All right. Yeah. This movie, I can look, whether or not we agree with the 1-star review, I think I'm going to be mostly agreeing with the people who are giving it like 5 and 6-star reviews, honestly.
I'm going to go up to a 7. I have affinity for it. It's stupid, but I think it's pretty fun. Particularly the ending. I love Danny versus the Predator. I love that he uses the thing's own saw blade to slice its arm off, which fucking rules. You know, it's not a great movie. It's certainly, one thing I was saying to you before this is like, watching it, I'm going like, with the Thompson brothers writing this, getting the solo writing credit on this, I'm like, Jesus, you really see what Black and McTiernan brought to it, right? Like, they definitely elevated that material. And of course, since, you know.
Even like the McTiernan directing of that film, I think this movie is not badly directed by any means, but I think it's very
I mean,
like
Hopkins,
workmanlike, and it works.
Totally competent Hopkins as a director, which we talked about. I mean, and he goes on to make a number of, you know, reasonably good movies. I like Judgment Night. I like Blown Away. I love The Ghost in the Darkness. Not as crazy about the Lost in Space movie.
Yeah.
But he does.
Is that the one with the big evil lion that Val Kilmer fights?
The 2 big evil lions.
Oh, okay.
They're manhunters. They sought out people to kill.
Ah, I see.
Yeah, and only Val Kilmer and Michael Douglas can stop them.
Right, of course.
I like that movie though. And then he goes on to be the first major director on 24, though, which is obviously forever cements him as somebody to respect for me.
You do love 24, John.
It's the best, man. One of the best ever. He, you know, like I said, and he directs a lot of TV now, and you know, solid director. Okay, so here we go. Some reactions to Predator 2. I'll start with a positive. Of course, this is the person giving this 10 stars. This comes to us from Lebowski T1000. I love, all in caps, this movie, 3 exclamation points. I just watched this movie again tonight for the first time in a long time, and I have to say that this movie is great. That's a tone of the tiger. Great. I know I'm going to get hurt for saying this, but I actually think I like Predator 2 just as much, if not more, than the original Predator. I'm not sure.
Insane.
I'm not sure, but I kind of think that I saw Predator 2 first, which may be the reason. I have that with some movies too. That's a little bit of my love of Ghostbusters 2, personally, is I think I saw Ghostbusters 2 first. I'm not saying I like it more than Ghostbusters, but when people are like, that was kind of a disappointing sequel, I'm like, we talk about Ghostbusters 2 is fucking great.
John, I can't tell if you're still in the review or not.
No, that's me.
Okay.
That is me. That's me.
But that is where the fine line of bleed for this is.
Yeah.
Like, wait, is this John talking or the
That's
reviewer?
me talking about this guy does not talk about Ghostbusters 2.
Okay.
Which may be the reason, but I think the true reasons are the following. Now I'm back to him. These are the guy's true reasons for liking Predator 2 perhaps more. He's still working that out.
Okay.
I love that the Predator has more weapons and the action sequences were more interesting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting, maybe, is a word you can
More
use.
interesting, yeah. I wouldn't necessarily say they're better, but maybe they are more. Okay. In this film, they do a much better job developing and explaining the Predator. That's by design. That's me talking now.
Sure.
Yeah. This isn't just a crazy beast that kills things left and right.
That wasn't the case in the first movie.
No, and actually I think maybe it's more the case in this movie. But
Uh-huh.
This is an intelligent being that is looking for a good hunt. I love that the Predator doesn't attack anyone he doesn't consider a threat or isn't a challenge. Okay. I love, once again, this guy loves the caps lock. I love that he has compassion and respect for an expectant mother. I also
Compassion
like
is a strong word.
respect, I think, is better. Yeah. I don't know. I think he just has respect for the unborn child as an innocent, not the mother specifically.
Ah, yes. The city hunter is pro-life. We know this.
Oh, yeah. He votes a Republican ticket because he really wants that.
Well, look, we know that the city hunter voted for Schwarzenegger because he respected him as both a killer of other predators and as a Republican nominee for governor.
Yeah. Schwarzenegger's such a weird Republican because I think he's actually pro-choice, but it's so weird. Anyway, I have to say there are only 2 or 3 little things that I didn't like about the movie, but they aren't anything I can't deal with. I wasn't too fond of the Predator being struck by lightning. Sure, it looks cool, but don't you think that would hurt him pretty bad?
That was pretty silly, not gonna lie.
Sure. All in all, I genuinely loved this movie. I don't know what it is about this movie that just doesn't sit well with a lot of reviewers on this site, but I loved it. I really hope that they go ahead with a 3rd installment. Oh, this was written in 2002 for reference.
I see.
But it won't be the same without Kevin Peter Hall, R.I.P. Thanks for reading. Cortex. He signs it. Or they sign it. I don't know.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Lebowski T1000.
Cortex, yeah. Now, Hiwatt, that's Hiwatt, Hiwatt, has a different review and maybe not as well spoken by just titling their review, Biggest Stinky Crap.
Ooh, wow, that's a tone setter right there.
This movie plain sucks. I'm a really big fan of the original Predator, but this movie is junk compared to it. This movie totally undermines the whole principle of the Predator. The Predator is a hunter, not a mass murderer. Wow, got some conflicting views here, don't we?
I mean, so far I'm in the same boat.
Yeah. He doesn't go around killing everyone he can. He picks choice kills and hunts them. Why did he kill all those people on the subway? Who knows? He didn't even take trophies of them. The scene with Keys when he tries to capture the Predator is totally predictable. Ooh, I wonder what's gonna happen. All right, that's one of those things that kind of irks me when it's like, yes, of course. You know he's... Anyway. This is totally predictable. I wonder what... maybe his whole team will get killed by the Predator. It's a real toughie. Then we get the Predator running to some apartment, crushing some wall tiles, and making some kind of healing substance. Is there something I don't know about wall tiles, or have they always had medicinal properties?
I will say that sequence does have my favorite line in the movie, which is the woman when Danny Glover comes out of the bathroom and says, "Don't worry, I'm a cop," and she like looks down the destroyed hallway and says, "I don't think he cares."
Yeah, I don't think he gives a shit, she specifically says, which is great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. That feels weirdly, that feels the most Shane Black, even though this isn't a Shane Black script.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a Predator thing. Then comes the ending scene, which totally baffled me. Danny Glover survives a fall down elevator shaft and ends up in a Predator ship that somehow got into an underground tunnel. Well, how in the hell did the Predators manage to get a ship into the tunnel of a middle of city with no one noticing? All right, that's one of those things that it's like, you're watching a Predator movie. I think you can.
If they've got cloaking technology
Yeah.
for their bodies, you'd think they'd have it for their ship.
Yeah. Anyways, Danny starts beating... I love my first name, Danny. Anyway, Danny starts beating up a Predator, which has killed about 50 people throughout the movie. 28, actually, according to IMDb. Okay. Throughout the movie with ease, but somehow now has trouble killing Danny, who's gotten his butt kicked throughout the entire movie. Well, surprisingly, Danny Glover kills the Predator when all of a sudden a bunch of other Predators appear. They seem to have no problem with the fact that one of their buddies just died because they don't do squat to him besides giving him some old gun, which makes no sense at all. What does this old gun symbolize? I have no idea. Just imagine this guy's getting angry.
Oh, media literacy.
Well, Danny decides it's time to leave, so he jumps out. And we have almost the exact same ending as Predator, only in a city setting. Everything in this movie is pretty bad. The Predator couldn't hold a stick up. This Predator couldn't hold a stick up to the one in the original. He just doesn't have the same amount of skill. The Jamaican drug lords are laughable stereotypes, pot-smoking, Rastafarian pimps with Uzis. Danny Glover is the typical cop who can't stay out of trouble with his ragtag posse of cops who all managed to get killed. That's not true, but that's okay. I want to know why in every sci-fi movie they always have to have some scientist who wants to try and capture or make peace with some monster who has killed countless numbers of people. I have to agree with the person who was talking about Danny Glover's pants. They are freaking hilarious. At least 2 sizes too big and drooping all over. Everything in this movie.
That's a remnant of the 80s. That's not Danny Glover's fault.
No, yeah. That wouldn't have read weird at all. We can also talk about him and Bill Paxton's fedoras, which I love, when they both arrive. Anything. Everything in this movie stinks. Don't see it. It's got every Hollywood cliche all rolled into one movie. Stay far away from this movie. 1 out of 10 stars. That's where you're like, the movie's got problems, but number one, he's harping on very specific weird things that are also just like, I don't know, man. You did turn on a Predator movie.
Like, how does Danny Glover defeat the Predator at the end? It's because he pumped him full of shotgun shells,
Yes.
sliced off his hand, and they're both exhausted by the
That
end
is
of
not
movie.
a Predator at full strength. No, man. I mean, of course,
No.
yeah. That's part of the script. So, you could argue the same thing about Arnold, right? Like, how did Arnold? It's like, well, Arnold beat the shit out of him.
And dropped a big tree on his
Yeah,
head.
it's like, yeah, that's it exactly. Like, I don't know. You always have to weaken the Predator down. Spoiler alert, that's going to happen in every one of these movies, buddy.
Yeah, I mean, that's how Amber Midthunder's like whole last act of that movie is like slowly whittling that thing down.
Get it stuck in mud, beat the shit out of it, use its own weapons against it.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah. So that's Predator 2. A fun movie, but definitely I think was making everyone think, do we need more of these?
Yeah, and look, this is one of those sequels that can, I'm not going to say kill a franchise, but definitely let it like fade, right?
Yeah.
Like you have a sequel that has diminishing returns, and then sometimes the franchise just goes, maybe we just let it lie.
Well, I think in this case, this is a classic example of a big surprise hit, and then they're like, we need another one now. You know, circumstances be damned. We don't have the lead actor back. Let's just go. You know?
Yeah.
And
I mean, it's Jurassic Park, The Lost World all over again.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of that stuff. Yeah, stay tuned for
Though, to be fair, those movies happened after this one.
That's a whole different thing, too. Yeah, because we can talk about them sort of forcing Michael Crichton to write a novel sequel, and there's a whole thing. Yeah. Well...
What if Jeff Goldblum was still alive?
He is in the... Yeah, that's right. Because that's right. He clearly dies in the book and then is brought back. In the movie, he's just alive.
Yeah,
that's right, though. I do forget where they're like, actually... It's almost like Michael Crichton going, actually, no, I'm sorry. You all misread that.
Yeah. At the beginning of the Lost World novel, it's just like, and he was in a hospital for a few months.
Yeah.
Wait, what?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he. Okay. Anyway. Okay. Next week's movie though is gonna make us long for the days. I feel like I don't know your thoughts on this movie. I've been pretty. Everyone knows I fucking hate Alien 3.
Yeah, look, like I said, we're at the precipice with Predator 2. From here on out, the movies are going to it's going to be a wild pendulum. And if anything, we're descending into a valley at this point, and we're not going to dig our way out for decades.
No, sir. Because, I mean, we've got 2 more Alien movies, one of which I think you're more keen on than I am, but I think is okay.
I am a fan of Resurrection.
I haven't seen Resurrection forever, but I remember thinking it was okay. But, it is forced to reckon with the damage of this next movie. Which I think,
and it doesn't in some big ways.
No, it tries to just move aside, which is an interesting choice. But I did not remember this was the poster tagline for it. This should have ended a studio, just this poster. 3 times the suspense, 3 times the danger, 3 times the terror. Alien 3.
1992?
1992. And if you remember, it's Alien 3. What is that in To the Third?
It's Alien to the Third Power, yes.
Yeah. Brilliant. Why? No reason.
Because you write that to the third power $sign next to it?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's still made money, but I think generally, and we'll talk about, no one hates it more than the film's director. So whatever hatred I have for it. But yeah, we will be talking about maybe one of the most random directorial debuts in film history for David Fincher. The fact that David Fincher's career starts with Alien 3 is pretty weird. But that'll be next week on the show. So stay tuned for that. That'll be a depressing episode. Befitting the movie.
I mean, look, there's stuff to discuss there.
There definitely is. Oh yeah.
But yeah, it's a bit of a bummer.
The whole movie is just not fun at all. So but we'll talk about that next week. Of course, if you want more from this show and all the shows on the Punch Up Entertainment Network, you can have it at our Patreon page, which is patreon.com/punchupent. That's punchupent. Head over there. I said check out exclusive episodes of this show and other shows from the Punch Up Entertainment Network. But
yeah. You can also find all of our other shows on our YouTube page, which is youtube.com/@punchupentertainment. You can watch this show. You can read the comics along with us over on May the Panel Be With You. You can follow along with other seasons of the IP Squad. I think they're all organized into playlists over there. So
they certainly are, yeah.
And you can see me and a constant friend of the show, Elliot Lewis, play some video games over on Punch Up Plays. So yeah, come over there, comment, subscribe. Have a good time.
Indeed. But that's going to do it for this week's episode of the IP Squad. Until next week, the Case File.